All right, let's dive in. Today we're tackling social change in India, specifically how different generations see it.
Yeah, and we've got this one lecture that's really making us think. It even brings in ancient Indian philosophies and Western thought.
Oh, wow. That's a lot to unpack.
It is, but it all comes together in a really interesting way.
Okay, well, I'm hooked already.
You know how you always hear older folks saying, back in my day?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Well, this speaker suggests that holding on to that idea too tightly can actually slow down progress. It's
Interesting.
like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If young people believe things are only getting worse, well, that can make it harder to make things better.
Makes sense. If you don't believe in a better future, why work towards one?
Yeah.
But what about the other side? The older generation who thinks things were better in their time.
Right. The speaker addresses that too. They suggest that it's almost like a self-critique. Like they're accidentally saying, hey, maybe we didn't do enough to make things better.
Whoa, that's deep.
Yeah.
Adds a whole new layer to those generational conversations.
Exactly. But this deep dive goes beyond just, complaining about the good old days.
Oh, where does it go from there?
It connects those attitudes to big philosophical ideas, like the individualistic focus in ancient Indian philosophy. You see it in Dharma and even art and music.
Okay, so like thinkers from the Vedic sages
Hmm.
to Mahavira and Buddha, they all emphasized personal liberation, moksha, and finding your own purpose, your Purushartha.
You got it. But here's the question. Where does the well-being of society as a whole fit into all of that?
Right, because if you're so focused on yourself, what about everyone else?
And that's what the speaker is getting at. They say that maybe because of that focus on personal enlightenment, societal progress wasn't really prioritized.
So, like, the idea was to transcend the material world, not improve it.
Right. The material world was often seen as mithya, which means illusory or like a nautanki, a play.
So basically, they saw life as a temporary performance.
Yeah, and that maybe contributed to a feeling of detachment from the idea of societal progress.
Okay, I'm starting to see where this is going.
Yeah.
Then we've got Western philosophies coming in, especially during the Enlightenment,
Yeah.
right? And they had a totally different view.
Totally. Western thinkers said, hold on, this world isn't an illusion, it's real, and we can make it better. They embrace science, technology, all that.
It's like they saw the world as this blank canvas full of possibilities.
Exactly. And that really changed how people thought about progress.
It went from being all about personal enlightenment to working towards a better society for everyone.
Throughout it, it's like, hey, we can shape the world for the better.
So we have this clash, individualistic Indian philosophy versus the collective progress of Western thought. How did that play out in everyday life in India? I mean, how did people actually live with these different ideas?
Well, the speaker argues that traditional Indian societal norms, things rooted in caste and gender roles, they kind of reinforce that Natanki idea.
Wait, what do you mean?
Like it was as if everyone had a specific role to play in this big societal play, and they had to stick to the script.
So everyone was just performing their assigned roles, like they were all wearing costumes.
That's the idea. The speaker uses examples like clothing as a symbol of your social standing or behaviors based on your caste.
It's amazing how much those visual cues say about social expectations.
It really is. Like, even something as small as a mustache could show your caste.
Really? A mustache?
Yeah, or how a woman styled her hair or draped her sari. It could instantly tell you her marital status and her place in society.
Wow. So much meaning tacked into everyday things.
Right. So we have this focus on individual enlightenment and these predetermined roles in this societal play. But the lecture doesn't stop there.
Does it get critical of those traditional systems?
Oh, yeah, and in a pretty pointed way, too. The speaker argues that those systems put hierarchy and individual liberation ahead of the well-being of everyone.
Sounds like they're challenging the very foundation of how things work.
They are, and they even question figures like Vishwamitra and Vashishta.
Wow, those are some big names in Indian culture.
Right. But the speaker suggests that maybe their focus on enlightenment didn't really benefit society as a whole.
So their personal journeys didn't translate into making things better for everyone. That's a bold claim.
And it gets even bolder. The speaker challenges the whole idea of social harmony that these systems often claim to uphold.
It's interesting because, harmony and balance are so central to Indian philosophy. What makes them question it?
Well, they point to practices like sati and the caste system. They argue that those systems actually cause inequality and suffering.
Those are some powerful examples. It's
Yeah.
like saying, hey, these systems might claim to create harmony, but look at the reality.
Exactly. And it's a pretty direct critique of how these traditional systems are often romanticized.
So we've got this clash between individual enlightenment and societal progress, the influence of the West, and a critique of traditional systems. Where do we go from here? How does all of this connect to modern India?
Well, that's where this lecture gets really interesting. It goes into how those different perspectives played out in the arts and culture. You see, the speaker argues that traditional systems, like gurukuls, the old schools and gharanas, those artistic lineages, they ended up being kind of limiting.
So like gatekeepers almost,
Yeah.
controlling who got access to knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. It's like knowledge was confined to these select groups, but the speaker also acknowledges that those traditions did help preserve valuable knowledge and practices.
Right, so it's a trade-off. You get preservation, but maybe at the cost of innovation.
That's the tension, and it's highlighted when you compare it to the Sufis, who came in with a totally different approach.
Okay, I'm curious. What did the Sufis do differently?
Well, they emphasize things like universal love and compassion, nonviolence too. But the big thing was they wanted these principles to apply to all of society, not just individuals.
So they were looking outward instead of inward, like a more social focus.
Exactly. But, not everyone was thrilled about this shift.
I can imagine. Change can be scary.
Yeah, the speaker talks about how some people really clung to those old systems. They saw them as like the core of Indian identity, and change felt like a threat.
Makes sense. It's like, how do you balance respecting the past with the need to move forward? Did that tension actually lead to real changes in how Indian society worked?
The speaker argues that it's at the very heart of India's social evolution, even today. They believe that real progress happens when you find a balance between what individuals need and what society needs.
So not throwing out the old ways completely, but finding a way to integrate them with new ideas.
Right. And the speaker sees understanding the material world as key to all this, embracing things like science and technology.
It sounds like a call for progress, not stagnation. Did the speaker give any specific examples of how this integration could actually work?
Not really specific examples, but they stress the importance of critical thinking, questioning old norms, and even challenging authority when you need to, especially for the younger generations.
It's like they're saying, hey, young folks, you got to lead the way. But what about the older generations? The ones who might not be so keen on changing things?
Yeah, it's like saying, hey, you've got to be open to new ideas, but don't forget where you came from.
Finding that middle ground.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this lecture so thought-provoking. It doesn't give you easy answers. It asks hard questions, makes you really think about
A
things.
real deep dive.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about it. It gets you thinking on a whole other level, not just giving you facts, but sparking a conversation.
Right. And at the end of the day, that's what matters. It all comes down to you. How do you see this whole individual versus society thing playing out in India today? What role do you want to play in shaping the future?
Whoa. Those are some big questions.
They are, but they're important questions.
This deep dive has given us a lot to think about. I feel like I need some time to process it all.
That's natural. It's a lot to take in.
But I feel inspired too. Like, I want to learn more, be more involved, find my own place in this whole conversation about change, tradition, and where India is headed.
That's great to hear, because this is a conversation that involves all of us. It's our shared history, our challenges, and the future we're all building together.
Well said. And on that note, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into societal change in India. It's been a fascinating journey, and we hope it sparks some new ideas and conversations for you too.
Absolutely. Keep those conversations going.